This is Darwin to Jesus. Welcome back to the channel.
Oh, hi Deterge. It's wonderful to be back again. I mean, you just keep putting out these absolute bangers, and I will not be able to stay away. So, what have you got for us today? Something really stupid that demonstrates you have no idea how anything works, I hope. And no.
Today we're going to tackle a common accusation that atheists often make against Christians.
Is it that you guys will just not stop being so smart and right about everything because we know that God is real and we just hate him so much? Look, if you guys would stop being so reasonable and saying all the sensible things about the invisible sky/spaceman all the time, we wouldn't have to be so sad about it.
The so-called God of the Gaps fallacy. In case you haven't heard of this, I'll explain what it is. Then I'll explain why atheists are often misusing this phrase.
Okay, cool. God of the Gaps fallacies are so very fun. It's amazing how often people will continue using them, even after finding out that it's complete bullshit as a way to make an argument for God. Especially considering the further ramifications when those gaps are filled with, facts. But I do get ahead of myself.
Before I begin, I want to say that if I see any good responses to this video by an atheist, I will respond to the best one.
Oh, that's so fucking cute that he thinks anyone actually gives a shit that he would consider them to be the best one. I mean, if anything, the one he would actually respond to would have to be the one written in crayon and edited on a fucking leapfrog.
Stick to the arguments, be clear, and make good points, and you will be the winner. Now let's get into it.
And what a prize you shall receive, the smug droning of an idiot. And this was made 4 months ago, so either nobody cared, so there was no one to respond to, or more likely, they did and he didn't know how to respond to it, so he just pretended that he never made this offer. I do hope it's the first one though, because imagine if I'm the only person to enter this prestigious event, and he has to respond to a video calling him thicker than 2 short planks glued together with pig shit. I mean, I haven't even watched the video yet, and I'm definitely going to say that out of sheer bloody-minded reflex.
The expression God of the Gaps is normally said by atheists when a theist points to something that science has not yet explained, and the atheist is accusing the theist of making the argument, science can't explain this, therefore God.
Well, in that hyper-specific situation, that's not what they're doing. Your hypothetical theist, whether you meant to or not, didn't point at the thing science can't currently explain and say that means God did it. They just pointed at it. Now, if they did say, therefore God, which they often do, then absolutely. Just because we cannot explain something, and I cannot stress this enough yet, that doesn't mean that we won't. And even if we never do, you cannot just shove some other explanation in its place without, having some semblance of it jiving with reality. Like shoving God in there. But that's only because he's fake.
Now, obviously, if the atheists were correct in their interpretation of what's happening, then they'd be right, and this would be a fallacy.
Now, obviously, since this is a Darwin to Jesus video, the atheist is never right because all the atheists he knows are the ones that he's made up in his head, who say things he still doesn't understand even though it came out of his own brain, because he's too stupid, even for himself, but they're still wrong.
But they're not right about what's happening. So here's what's actually happening.
What? But how could you possibly know what is happening in all circumstances of this? I mean, even in your hypothetical, we have to at least assume that they are pointing to the thing being evidence for their argument that God does the real. And then, yeah, that is in fact a God of the Gaps. The idea that this is never what they're doing is completely fucking wild.
Imagine 2 detectives arrive at a scene where a body has been found.
Why are we imagining a Tuesday at my house? It's okay though, I wasn't doing anything nefarious. I just killed a random who-mans and then invited the police-mans to my house so I would get 3 meals for the price of 1. What really baffles me is the fact that they keep falling for it every single week.
They are faced with 2 potential theories to explain what happened.
God did it, or Darwin did it. They are both in the room, armed with knives, guns, and bazookas, and both are wearing I Hate Alive People shirts. I mean, it's pretty clear who did it from that evidence. It was Steve, and not just because I wanted an excuse to get him kicked out of the house share.
The first detective believes that the best explanation for the evidence is that a murder took place. Someone else was involved in the death. The second detective, however, thinks that the person died of natural causes, meaning no other person was involved.
Okay, but you said there was evidence. I mean, unless it's super fucking ambiguous, the likelihood of two detectives coming to such wildly different conclusions is pretty slim. And, okay, so maybe we're talking about walk into the room conclusions where you're just going with your gut instinct? Well, eventually, you're going to have to study that shit, and the clear, superior conclusion is going to become pretty fucking obvious. AKA, God definitely didn't do it. I mean, at least Darwin is real.
As they examine the evidence, both detectives try to fit the facts with their respective theories.
That is not how theories are established. Holy shit. I mean, I don't know about law enforcement, but I'm pretty sure even they tend to follow the evidence to the conclusion and not decide which bits of evidence fit into whatever thing they want to be true. At least for the good ones. See, this is super telling of how your brain works, or doesn't work, if I want to be mean about it. And I do. Because you think people are just stuffing the evidence for things into the ideas that they already have, when no, that's not how we come to proper conclusions that reflect reality. We let the evidence tell us what happened. That's why when we find new stuff that doesn't fit in with our ideas, we change the ideas. I think they call it science.
The detective who believes in the murder theory might point to bloody footprints leading away from the scene and say to the other detective,
"Look, dipshit, there's fucking bloody footprints." And I'm assuming like a shitload of stab wounds or bullet holes in the victim. Because you'll need a decent amount of blood gushing out to get some decent bloody footprints. But that's not important. The fact that the person is less person now and more pile of bloody viscera is irrelevant. I mean, that's just what happens when you die, right? It's what happened to old Grandpa Sick, just sitting there and then boom. And on a day his dynamite collection went missing. Coincidences are weird.
If your theory is correct and no one else was involved in this death, how do you explain these bloody footprints?
I like the idea that he wasn't calling them bloody footprints, but that he was swearing like a true English boy. How do you explain these bloody footprints, you fucking numpty? You know, I would watch the shit out of that copper show.
The detective isn't necessarily claiming that the footprints prove there was a murder, but he is challenging the natural cause theory to account for this evidence.
Okay, but again, and as much as I was clearly taking the piss with the many holes hypothesis, if someone was killing and bloody footprints are directly related, you would expect like something, a stab wound, a gunshot, fucking blunt force trauma, something that would cause a person to, you know, bleed and subsequently die. That is what would lead someone to believe that they were murdered. The bloody footprints would just make you look for such a thing. It's after that that you'll start coming to them conclusion boys.
This scenario is analogous to discussions between theists and atheists.
Wait, aren't you going to give us some possibility for it being natural? Oh, right, of course not, because in your head, you're the detective thinking murder, and you are sure you have seen bloody footprints. And you are right about it being analogous to theists and atheists, except that in this circumstance, you're talking about footprints that aren't there, and we're in a hospital room with a bunch of doctors screaming at you that the cause of death was in fact natural. But you're so convinced that someone must have murdered this person that your only recourse is to start making shit up.
In these debates, we are dealing with two overarching theories. Either God exists, theism, implying that a mind is responsible for the existence of everything, or God does not exist, atheism, suggesting that everything can be explained by natural causes without a mind, naturalism.
Oh my god, you do this over and over again. Someone, somewhere, must have explained to you that naturalism and atheism aren't the same fucking thing. Do you know how you can tell? Because they have different words for them. Atheism is not the same thing as naturalism. Atheism is not in any way the denial for the possibility of any kind of supernatural idea. Atheism is simply the fact about a person that they do not think that gods are real. Full stop. The fact that you cannot internalize this very basic concept is why it's so fucking easy to make fun of you. because it's like you don't actually want to be correct, you just want to be quote unquote right, which is not the same thing, because one is, being factually accurate and the other is a feeling that you are having and nothing else.
When theists observe certain facts that seem difficult to explain on naturalism, they ask atheists, how do you explain this on your theory?
Like what? No, seriously, like fucking what? Off the top of my head, I cannot think of anything that doesn't have some plausible naturalistic explanation, at the very least, and most things have very solid naturalistic explanations that are supported by the evidence, because again, these explanations are reached by following that evidence.
For example, theists might point to the origin of life and ask, how do you explain life arising from non-life?
Might. They constantly fucking do that. You know why? Because it's something that we currently can't prove. Definitely how it would have happened. I mean, we have some solid ideas, most of which theists who say this shit ignore, or more likely have never heard, and there's a lot. Way more than I'm going to go into here, but maybe I'll put a bit of it, there. Anyway, yeah, it can be explained to some degree naturally. So that's a fucking failure from the off. I'm starting to think you don't really know much, my dude.
On naturalism, it's challenging to understand how life could emerge from non-life, as this seems counterintuitive.
No, it's not. At least not if you understand anything about the science related to abiogenesis, which, what am I going to say? He totally doesn't do, so of course it's challenging to him. But again, plenty of explanations that make sense with actual supporting evidence for a lot of it to boot. Maybe next time you want to say something dumb that you think is just facts TM, you should stop and say, hey, let's actually fact check so I don't look stupid online. So do it for literally every single thing you ever say.
However, on theism, it's much easier to explain because an intelligent designer, God, could have created life.
Yeah, that's the easy explanation, apart from all the extra baggage that such a claim comes with, that all have to be addressed for any reasonable person to accept such a claim. Like, which fucking God? Or the overwhelming lack of evidence for God or gods producing life from non-life, among others. Because that's the problem with easy explanations. Yeah, if you don't think about it, God did it is way easier than all this shit. But when the fuck did easy ever mean right? Oh, and if you bring up fucking Occam's razor, I'm going to use it to cut off my own goddamn head. Because the simplest is also not the same as easy. Some of them simple explanations for things are really unintuitive.
This question is not a God of the gaps argument, where God is invoked simply because something is unexplained.
Yes, it fucking is. No matter how hard you try to weasel words your way into making it not so, it absolutely is a God of the gaps argument. Because you have something the science doesn't fully understand. And literally all you said was, but what if God though? A thing that nobody is even capable of proving exists.
Instead, it's a comparison of which theory, naturalism or theism, better accounts for the available evidence.
Theism isn't even a fucking theory. Neither is naturalism, but naturalism at least has something to say about theories. Theism is so fucking many different explanations for whatever topic you want to discuss that using it as a catch-all is easily one of the stupidest things you can do. And considering the rest of this video, that chasm is vast.
Just like the detectives comparing their theories, the best explanation is the one that can account for the most facts in the simplest and most coherent way.
So not God did it then. And no, not even. That's an oversimplification, which ironically is what makes you wrong. Yeah, often that is the case, but sometimes it's just the one that's, fucking right.
Theists argue that their worldview provides a more straightforward and comprehensive explanation for certain phenomena, such as the origin of life, than atheism does.
No, it gives one explanation for basically fucking everything, that God did it, which is a complete non-argument and is abso-fucking-lutely God of the gaps. The fact that you don't realize that is as hilarious as it is depressing.
When a theist asks, what is your explanation for this phenomena, whether it be consciousness, the beginning of life, or the beginning of the universe, and the atheist has no answer because science has not solved the problem,
See, it's shit like this that shows me you haven't fucking spoken to any atheists whatsoever. All of those things have explanations, and atheists don't exclusively look to science to answer things as well. Science isn't something exclusive to atheists. In fact, did you know you could use science to answer your questions? I know you won't, but you could, and it would be a nice change of pace.
The atheist might respond by saying, well, you're just assuming that God must be responsible.
I mean, again, I'm pretty sure if you had fucking bothered to speak to any atheists that you would get a lot more than that. But yeah, you do assume that God's responsible. It's literally your worldview. You're a creationist. If you didn't assume God did it was the answer to every question ever, it would be kind of weird. Also, you think that assuming your conclusion is how this works. So you have to be doing that by your own admission.
In doing so, the atheist is really admitting that they don't have any explanation within their worldview for these phenomena.
I mean, atheism isn't a worldview. There are so many worldviews that contain atheism, but you should already know this since you talk so fucking confidently as an ex-atheist. I mean, you looked into these other worldviews before deciding on the stupidest fucking one you could possibly have gone with, aka being a creaty boy, right?
This situation would be like a detective who believes a murder took place, pointing to bloody footprints leaving the scene and asking his partner, how do you explain these bloody footprints if the cause of death was natural? How do you explain these if there was no other person involved?
Well, isn't it obvious? The guy was watching one of your videos, had a massive brain hemorrhage, blood started gushing out of his nose, which goes on his shoes. He stumbles back a few steps, falls down, and fucking dies. And you know what? You're right. Your video does still count as some form of grievous bodily harm, so...
If the other detective then dismisses this by saying, this is just murder of the gaps.
Oh my god, you aren't the first detective, because then he would be as fucking stupid as you are. Not the other way around. God damn it.
Without actually addressing the question, it's clear how disingenuous and lacking in substance that response would be.
Yeah, it sounds like saying God did it for all your arguments for how the universe is formed. Oh wait.
The question by the first detective is legitimate and deserves an answer, but instead the response shifts to a straw man argument about what the first detective is saying.
The only straw man going on here is yours on how the God of the Gaps fallacy is used to demonstrate that saying God am do the do is intellectual laziness at its worst. It's the kind of thing that only someone thicker than two short planks glued together with pig shit would ever think to say. Oh hey, I did the thing.
Wait, before you go, I have something super important to tell you. It's life or death. It will change everything forever. Nope, wait, it's gone. Oh well, probably wasn't important. But while I have you, don't forget to comment, subscribe and notify. And if you want more of my smexy voice, check out Mrs. Six's channel Spoonstaff Stories, where I narrate and voice all the videos, and she does the work. And if you want to support the channel, check out the merch store for cool t-shirts, or check out Patreon, memberships and PayPal to support directly. Finally, follow me on the medias of social to get completely pointless guff and to keep up on the latest releases. Oh, I just remembered what I was going to tell you. Whatever you do, don't touch the